Hi, welcome to Chapter 2. What is a work of art? The author suggests that any work of art is something made by human hands with an intention to be art, and that experts agree that it is indeed art. But what experts? Who are these people? What gives them the skill or the right to judge what is a work of art? Who says what a work of art actually is? Is it really an expert? The way the authors write the chapter, they suggest that there are people who know more than the rest of us about what art is. I would disagree. The authors would have us think, as an example, the photo of the execution in Vietnam is not art, but photojournalism. I disagree. The photographer made choices in the exposure and in the printing processes which alter the eye's focus of content. Whenever a photographer does this, the picture goes from merely a recording media to artistic media. Does the photographer's changes alter the information conveyed, taking it away from journalistic integrity? Usually not. Rather, those changes alter how we ourselves feel about what we're perceiving, making us, at best, feel more what the photographer intended. That makes it art. So, in determining artistic viability, we should think less about who says it is art and more about what is going on. What makes art is the participative experience. Even the author suggests this is the basic determining factor for art. If a piece of art grabs you, it grabs your attention and it holds it, then it's art. Now, there is art we see every day which does not grab us and hold us, but that is usually because of its familiarity rather than its artistic merits. Some examples would be public works of art, such as sculptures and paintings, usually murals, and they're made as part of a civic project, something to beautify the buildings around us. Often they can be quite old, decades or longer. But to us, they seem just a part of the civic landscape. We hardly see them. It's those instances, however, that we should consider choosing to look at these things as art, because that's how they were designed. Make it a point to see it as art and not as a familiar feature of the surroundings, as the rest of the buildings are, because they're not buildings. When you do that, when you look at it as art, does it grab your attention? Does it focus where it wants you to look? Does it give you an experience, an internal feeling about what might be going on either in the piece or in you, or something else that's related to both? If it does that, it's art. Another thing to consider as you read this chapter is that what does art say, or what does our society say, that we judge art less as a participative experience, and more for its quality as determined by so-called experts. We look at a piece of art that sells for $35 million and we go, oh, that's art. But something, say, an illustrator makes in the middle of an artist's alley at a comic convention, something I do, we look at that as something less than art, even though we are just as skilled in many ways. We might not have hundreds of years of aging on our artwork. It's more immediate. But for a fan of the piece, it's just as artistic, and sometimes more so, than a $35 million painting. What does that say about our culture? Another thing, what does it say about our culture that we tend to value shock and speed in our art rather than a dedication to skills developed over time? In other words, young artists can very often be seen as more valuable, more vibrant, more important than those who have spent their time honing their skills to such a fine level. What does that say about our culture, about us? There's a video that talks about this, which I've posted for you to watch once you've read the chapter. So, ask yourselves, What is art to you? What do you like? Not just, oh, I like that when you look at it, but, oh, that affects me. I want to have that around. Okay? And it can affect you in a little way, and sometimes it can affect you in a huge way. They're both art, just at different degrees. Consider what I've said. Consider your own opinions. Read the chapter, and do the discussion, and see what you think. In the discussion, you'll notice that I've asked you to look for a piece of art that affects you and post it so that we can all talk about it in the discussion. If you have any questions, email me.